If a podcast drops in the middle of the internet and no one is there to listen, does it make a sound?
A 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the 10th and final episode of this fall season of A Very Odd Caster. 10 episodes in, and we still don't know what the hell we are. We've been doing a lot of experimenting, and we'll continue to do so when we reconvene in 2023. We're going to take a break because the holidays are coming, and, a lot of shit going on, right? So for this last episode of the fall season, we're going to look at plot lines on movies and TV that just won't fly anymore, primarily due to the so-called woke culture and the cancel culture, whatever they call it. There's just a lot of plots that were sort of traditional plots from Hollywood in the movies and on television, whatnot, that no longer are acceptable by the norms of today. So some people would say this is a higher sensitivity going on in the entertainment field. Some people say it's blatant censorship. It's probably a little bit of both. But censorship in and of itself has really always existed for a long time. If you look at anything, Elvis Presley, when he made his debut on the Ed Sullivan Show, I believe. They would only show him from the waist up back in those cheeky days of the 1950s because there is a lot going on below the waist, if you know what I mean. And so that was shocking, and therefore TV had to censor that in a way. Maybe you'd call it harsh modification, but basically, they wouldn't show Elvis from the waist down because he was jiggling too much. It went on, and then the Beatles came along. The Beatles, of course, seemed like they were pretty squeaky clean in comparison, but there was a lot of censorship going on with them. Particularly, there was an album the Beatles released in the United States, not in England. So it was sort of a hybrid album of their English albums, and it was the Yesterday and Today album. And when they first issued the album, the cover showed the Fabs wearing these sort of art smocks or lab coats or something, and they had all these dismembered dolls and blood, and they had meat like from a butcher shop all over the place, and they had these diabolical looks on their face, which was totally counter to the Beatles' image, and it was known as the butcher cover. And after just a few days on the market, Capitol Records yanked the album off the shelves because there had been some complaints. So censorship was alive and well. That was probably 1965 or 6, I guess it was. And they replaced it with this cover where they're all sitting in these sweaters, and they looked like they were in a timeout. They're like, okay. But so censorship was going on then. But in TV and movies, censorship has been going on for a long time as well. Note that you never see any episodes of the original Little Rascals show. That show, how old was that? I don't even know, 1930s? Maybe 1940s? I don't know. It was an old show. But that's one that they yanked years ago, way before all this cancel culture and all this stuff was going on. Because I presume it's because of buckwheat. Buckwheat was a stereotypical character, and that didn't fly. I'm guessing that's what it was. I don't know. Maybe it was offensive to people with a cowlick sticking up. No. It had to do with buckwheat. There was another African-American kid on that show. I'm trying to remember his name. Stymie? He had the little derby hat. He was a cool kid. That was a cool show. It was just, So, censorship has been alive and well for quite a while. But the plot line, there are actual plot lines that Hollywood won't touch anymore, TV won't touch anymore. And I wanted to chat about that a little bit. And the plot line I'm talking about is the good girl falls for bad boy plot line. So this is an ages-old plot line for movies and TV. You can go way back to, this is the Beauty and the Beast type plot line. So Disney, when they created Beauty and the Beast originally, I don't know when that was, but it was obviously Belle was this princess who fell in love with the Beast, Well, that plot line doesn't work anymore, kids, because in order to be a beast, you've had to do something bad to somebody. You have to be, an undesirable character. And so, that isn't flying anymore. So that was an animated plot line. But when you get into some of the actual movies over the years, you go back to West Side Story. All right, Broadway / movie, whatever. But I know West Side Story was based on the Romeo and Juliet concept, but it was also good girl falls for bad boy type thing too. And you had Maria, who was the good girl, falling for Tony, who was a former gang member, right? And granted, this was all pretty squeaky clean because this was the 50s or whatever, all I remember about West Side Story is these guys were supposed to be, these gangs were getting ready for a street fight, and they're going like this. I said, God, is that menacing? I think I changed the channel about that. So even in a goofy story like that, you had the good girl falls for the bad boy. Later on, like in the movies, I'm going to pick some random stuff. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, you don't think of that movie as having that sort of a plot line, but there was a strong subplot to the Sundance Kid's girlfriend, whose real name was Etta Place. I'm at a place right now. I'll call you back in a minute. Just great name, though, Etta Place. So she was the Sundance Kid's girlfriend. And in the movie, she was played by the beautiful Catherine Ross. And the movie actually suggested that Etta Place had a thing for both Sundance and Butch. And of course, in the movie, it was Robert Redford in his prime as the Sundance Kid and Paul Newman in his prime as Butch Cassidy. And those guys, of course, were like the two best looking dudes on the planet and loaded with charisma, great actors. And Hollywood kind of didn't make them out to be bad guys. But let's cut to the chase, folks. Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kids robbed people for a living. They shot and killed people along the way, all right? So whatever Hollywood was doing, casting the most famous leading men in Hollywood at that time, doesn't whitewash the fact that those guys were criminals, right? And Etta Place was at a place in her life where she just couldn't decide between which criminal she liked the best. So, and then more recently, I guess, you had Grease, another musical like West Side Story, the old Travolta and Olivia, rest in peace. Love Olivia. Danny and Sandy, right? Danny was a bad boy, and Sandy was a squeaky clean girl, And more recent times, you had Titanic, right? You had Rose, the good girl, falling for Jack, the Leo character, right? Now, by the way, I want to do my impression of the love scene in Titanic. Watch. Thank you. I'm here every Thursday. Where was I? Works a little better on glass, and with a little fog on the windshield. Anyhow. So, Leo's character, Jack, he wasn't really a bad boy. He was just poor as shit. This was more of a class thing. But it kind of was that good girl, bad boy type thing. Probably the most blatant use or overplay, if you will, of the good girl, bad boy romance was on the daytime soap opera General Hospital back in I don't know, I was a kid. My mom watched it, so I was quite aware of the storyline. Luke and Laura. General Hospital is a soap. I don't know if it's still on. I don't know. My mom used to watch these things, so since I couldn't watch cartoons because the TV was being used, I would watch them too. So I was kind of familiar with the whole Luke and Laura thing. And this was like one of the most watched, when Luke and Laura got married, it was like the most watched episode of a soap opera, a daytime soap opera in history. And the plot line was Laura was this good girl, pretty blonde girl, and she was engaged to marry this squeaky clean, handsome doctor. Imagine that, a doctor in a show called General Hospital. So she's engaged to marry Scotty. Everything's going good. I can't remember what happened, but Laura, the character, comes into the orbit of this, the sort of the underbelly of society. I can't remember how it came about, but there was this guy, Luke, and he was a pimp. He managed prostitutes, okay? So he was a seedy character. And I wish I could remember more, but somehow circumstances, maybe she had a sister who was in trouble, I don't know. But they got to know each other. And there was this tense, it seemed to be a hostility between the two of them. But then it kind of grew into a friendship and whatnot. And, well, anyhow, cutting to the chase, at some point, Luke is alone with Laura and he rapes her. He doesn't ask her for a massage. He doesn't ask her on a date and she was offended. He raped her. He forced her to have sex with him, okay? So, of course, Laura winds up marrying him. And it was the most watched daytime soap opera in history. And that was like the late 70s, I think. So, so the deterioration of society is a new thing. Yeah, so Laura and Luke, who raped her, got married and they lived happily ever after. They did. They wound up, both of them leaving the show and riding off into the sunset together, I think. I don't know. Maybe they got divorced. Everybody gets divorced on soap operas and in Hollywood. Yeah, so, girl meets boy, boy rapes girl, girl marries boy. It's a classic plot line. I don't think that one would fly these days. What kind of hashtags could we have on the Luke and Laura thing? Yeah.
Something tells me if I pursue this much further, I'm going to get myself into hot water.
But obviously, Hollywood was pushing the good girl, bad boy thing way to the extreme. And Luke and Laura was New York, not Hollywood. And New York's got much higher morals. So anyhow, sometimes the script would be flipped, so to speak, and you'd have the good guy meets the bad girl or falls for the bad girl. There was the one I'm thinking of is Pretty Woman, right? You had the wealthy, successful, lonely bachelor, the dashing Richard Gere, fresh off his appearance in Looking for Mr. Goodbar, I might add. So you had this really rich guy, handsome guy, who is lonely, so he picks up prostitutes and pays them well, and then off he goes. Well, he picks up one prostitute by the name, I forget her name, but it was Julia Roberts, and he falls in love with her, and they wind up together, and it's kind of this romance thing. So this was a case of good guy meets bad girl and falls for her. And they finessed the story so Julia Roberts' character was sympathetic. She had to go into prostitution because, everyone has to go into it, right? For the same reason, right? Money. Oh, how many prostitutes do you interview and they say, "No, I went into it because I like to work. I'm a horny girl." No, they go into it for the money. It's easy money, and a lot of people are desperate. So anyhow, but Hollywood always tends to make the bad girl, bad guy sympathetic somehow, and that's what they did with this. I'm trying to think any other movies with the good guy, bad gal plot line. Arthur, the movie Arthur was another one where, I don't know if it was good guy meets bad girl, because Arthur was a drunk. And I'm talking about the original Arthur. I didn't see the remake, but this is the Dudley Moore one with Liza Minnelli. And so, but when you really stop and think of it, both Pretty Woman and Arthur and those types of movies, Officer and a Gentleman, those aren't really good guy meets bad girl type plot lines. Those are really the Cinderella plot lines, if we cut to the chase, right? Down and out or poor, lower class, whatever, woman, but nice woman, meets the prince, the handsome prince. And in the case of Richard Gere, the handsome prince picks up prostitutes. No biggie. In the case of Arthur, he's a roaring drunk who's 5'1". No biggie, right? Richard Gere was an officer and a gentleman too, right? He's sort of at the center of this shit, But anyhow, these are plot lines. The Cinderella one probably will endure, although it's not a good look for the feminist side, is it? Oh, my life's nothing. I just wish there was a prince to come along and save me. Gloria Steinem loves that plot line, right? But the other plot line, the good girl falls for bad guy. I don't know. You couldn't do that anymore. You definitely couldn't do Luke and Laura anymore. So, you know, I'm so pumped. I'm going to go turn on General Hospital. There might even be some actors playing doctors on that show. So that was today's focal point. Hey, knock it off up there.
Got the blue state blues, seeing red all the time. Got the blue state blues, seeing red all the time. Gonna drown my blue state sorrow in a bottle of red, red wine. I get the blue state blues every time I see the polls close. I get the blue state blues every.
Pandas. You can't live with them, you can't live without them. So we are about to roll into the holiday season here, and we are taking a hiatus for that till 2023. But as we draw near Christmas, I often think of Christmases past. No, this isn't a Dickens thing. Well, it could be kind of a Dickens thing. But as I reflect upon Christmases past, it reminds me of stupid ass things from my childhood. And this edition of Stupid Ass Things from My Childhood has to do with Christmas. And this is kind of a, every time I tell this story to people, they always say, "Oh, that's sad." So you be the judge. But it's a stupid ass thing. So when I was 3 years old, about, my older sister was all of 5. And, you know, Christmas was just, as a little kid, the coming of Santa Claus, I mean, it's just great. It's just it's something, parents do with their kids, and they just love doing it when they're little, and I love doing it with my kids. But when I was 3, my older sister just couldn't wait for Christmas, and this fits her personality even to today. And so she was snooping around the house when my mom was probably busy working or something. And my sister gets into this storage area, and this would be in probably November or something like that, around this time, many, many years ago. And she gets into the storage room and she uncovers a stack of presents wrapped to the T, and on the presents it said to so-and-so, "From Santa." And so my wise gal sister has uncovered the truth. And she runs, and what's the first thing she does with this bit of information? She goes and spoils it for her 3-year-old brother. Yeah, she comes up and she tells me, "There's no such thing." I don't want to say that too loud because I don't want actual kids to hear that. But, so just in case they're the only ones listening. So she pulls me aside and says, "Guess what?" And breaks the news to me, right? And, I have a good memory for things that happened when I was really little. And I remember just sort of, very vaguely, just being in disbelief. You talk about a letdown. I, by the way, trace this moment in my life to the reason why I'm such a scathing cynic. You know, if you were told at that age the truth about the fat man and the white beard, and that, Rudolph was just a drunk dude with a red nose and not a flying reindeer, you'd probably be pretty cynical too. But anyhow, yeah, so my sister and I then, once I got over the shock, we decided to kind of play a little bit of a joke on my mom. So my mom's working in the kitchen or something, and we kept running around through the house, running through the kitchen going, "There's no such thing as Santa Claus!" And my mom's like, "What?" Then we run back through, "There's no such thing as Santa Claus!" And my mom couldn't understand what we were saying, but we were having a blast, And, but do you think I turned away the presents? Of course not. That's what handouts are for, right? But that is indeed another stupid ass thing from my childhood. And now it's time for a word from our make-believe sponsor. With Thanksgiving just around the corner, people are scurrying around getting the supplies they need to have themselves a perfect feast for this coming holiday season. And that's why we here at A Very Odd Caster highly recommend you purchasing the O.J. Simpson electric carving knife. I don't know what got into me. But that is a word from our make-believe sponsor. Well. So anyhow, we are in our last episode of this fall season. We will reconvene in some capacity after the first of the year. We are going to adjourn for the holidays. And when we do reemerge, exactly when, sometime in January, we're going to see if we're going to tweak some of this format, maybe add a call-in feature, at least occasionally, maybe even have a guest or two here or there. Not sure yet. Going to go study the film, as they say. So have a wonderful holiday season, and eat, drink, and be merry. Or Gretchen, or Sylvia, or Heather, or Luke and Laura.
Artificial dabble, walking high, fisted combat, crawling in the trenches, how they hide from the wenches of Pendlebury. Do you know what I'm talking about?